Thanks for allowing me to be here this morning. I wanted to start by sharing with you a night that changed my life forever. So it was November of 2006. I was living in New Jersey. My wife was 6 months pregnant, and I was a few weeks away from being promoted to partner at a CPA firm. There were about 16 inches of snow on the ground, and my wife and I were cuddled up on the couch, and we were waiting for the lottery drawing. Any of you guys from New Jersey? This is woman Yolanda Vega, used to read out the numbers. And I started hearing my numbers, one after the other. And so my heart started racing, my mind was like swirling. I was thinking of all the ways my life would change. And, since I was a little kid, I always had this dream that I wouldn't have to worry about money. And then my wife started shaking me and she's like, honey, get up, I have to pee. And I realized I was just dreaming. That night, I realized something that really impacted me. See, I've been living this life that I thought I was supposed to live. I was 29 years old, and I did everything that I thought was supposed to make for a good life. I got educated, I met a great woman, we got married, we were working hard, we bought a house, we were about to have our first kid. And so it was like I was working so hard running in this one direction, only to look up and feel like I was lost. I want to kind of take you back a little bit. When I was 3, my parents got divorced. I grew up with a single mom raising me and my 2 brothers. And she would have 2 jobs and sometimes 3, but it was always a struggle. Just everything was a struggle. And in contrast, my dad is an accountant and he had his own accounting firm. And business had its ups and downs, but when he would take us out to dinner, we could order dessert. And sometimes on a Sunday, we'd go bowling and then we'd be able to go to the movies. So even as like a little kid at 9 years old, I remember thinking, I want that freedom. I want that financial security. And I wanted to be like my dad. So I went to college for accounting. I graduated from Rutgers University, and I joined his accounting firm. And I worked my ass off, day and night, hustle and grind, 8 years, until there I was a couple weeks away from being promoted to his partner. And the good news is I was able to help grow that firm. We went from 12 people to 70, from $2.5 million in revenue to 15. But I wasn't feeling fulfilled, and I knew I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. But I didn't want to disappoint my dad. He'd given me this opportunity that so many people would die for. And then, I'm sure like many of you, it's like you do one thing for so long, you just wonder, how am I going to do something else? So I'd been buying lottery tickets for years, and I don't know what it was about that night, but something changed. It was just that light bulb that went off. My wife and I started talking about what would change if we won. And put aside the cars or the houses or the vacations, what it really came down to for me was creating a life of freedom. And I being a partner at a CPA firm, that's a great gig, but it wasn't going to be the life that I wanted. And so, the life we were living, I just realized I was like trapped in that golden cell, as they say, and I had to get out. So I spoke to my dad, and he gave me his blessing, and I left and I started my own wealth management firm on January 2nd of 2007. It was about a month before my son was born, and the day after I became a partner. So by the time the following winter rolled around, my son Jared was 9 months old, and part of that freedom for us was spending part of the winter here, down in Florida. So in December, we went down to Hollywood Beach, and every morning we'd walk on the boardwalk with him in the stroller. My grandfather by our side, he lived down here. And it was awesome. We'd have lunch by the pool with the palm trees looking out over the ocean. And I got one of those lottery tickets on one of my trips. And we started talking about what would change this time if we won. And I realized if I could live anywhere, I'd live in Florida. And then it dawned on me like, well, can I live anywhere? The trouble is my wife and I were both raised in New Jersey. We went to Rutgers together. My family and her family were both all in New Jersey. My business was in New Jersey. My network was in New Jersey. Really, everything was in New Jersey. So what would it be to pick up and leave? And what I thought was, most of these things in my life that I've had to change, it wasn't money that was required. It was guts. It was courage. And so what I did is I started planning. I owned a business in New Jersey, actually a couple, and I tried to replace myself in that business so I could move down here to Florida and still have an income from that company. And I kept failing. I hired 3 different people. They all didn't work out. I couldn't get myself out of the business. And then I heard an author, and he was talking about this study of people on their deathbeds. And what he found is that 80% of the people, their biggest regret is something they didn't do. It's not something they did. And I realized I didn't want that to be me. I didn't want to keep trying and failing and pushing off, my dreams. So we just did it. We got up and moved. By that time, my son Jared was 4. We had a newborn daughter, Eden. She was 8 months old. And my wife was home with them. She was a homemaker. And we came down to Florida really with nothing. We didn't have a network. We didn't have a group of people. I had a grandfather who at the time was still alive, but that's not much by way of a community. And I went to Publix to do my grocery shopping, for the first time as a Florida resident. And I got that ticket, and we went home, and my wife and I sat at dinner that night. We started talking about what would change if we won. And one of the things that I had been doing as an entrepreneur is always planning for my business, always thinking about the future, having a plan. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? But I never really did that for my family. I never stopped to think, where are we as a family? Where do we want to be and how are we going to get there? Yeah, we had made some big changes in life. Things were good, but I wasn't so thoughtful about it. And I realized if I hit the big numbers, that's what I'd do. I'd run my family like I was running my business. And so that week, my wife and I sat down and we mapped out our 5-year plan. And we're thankful enough, her parents come down here over Christmas break. They'll take the kids for a few days, and she and I sit down and we map out the year ahead and our long-range vision. And then every quarter, we sit down together, we look at, how did we perform financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, how are we doing? And being in that process, it's amazed me what we could achieve. Because I would have never thought 10 years ago that life would be the way it is today. Before I knew it, my son was graduating from kindergarten, and it was the first time the Powerball hit 300 million. So I had my ticket in hand, and we were planning our summer trip. We were going to New Jersey to spend some time at Sesame Place. And it struck me that if I won the lottery, we'd be on vacation all summer. And then, when we came back and the kids went to school, certainly, for all the kids' holidays and all the kids' breaks, why would I work if I didn't need any money? And so I decided, let me work towards that. How could I work only on school days? And what that led me to thinking is, how do I say no? How do I start saying no to more things? And my test became, would I do this if I won the lottery? Would I go to that charity outing? Would I serve on that board? Would I join that organization? Would I take that meeting? And all of a sudden, it started becoming clear to me that so much of what I was doing, I really didn't want to do. I was just doing it for money. And I was involved in a lot of businesses. I ended up exiting 4 companies that I was a part of. 2 of them I closed, 2 of them I sold. And it's really influenced a lot of the decision making for me, because I love business. I love being an entrepreneur. But really what I love most is being an investor. And for me, what that means is I like supporting people and their mission. And I do that now. I invest in large-scale real estate projects. I invest in businesses. And then I own a portfolio of websites, which we're taking public next year. So I've moved from being an entrepreneur to being an investor, and I get to focus every day on the things that I'm great at, which is marketing, strategy, and finance. And I'm not going to stop. If I still buy those tickets, I'm still doing what I'm doing. A couple years ago, I was approaching my 40th birthday. My wife and I were going to turn 40 and trying to figure out how are we going to celebrate. And again, one of these lottery tickets, we started talking about philanthropy and giving and how that would change what we give and how we give. And so we decided to take our 40th birthday and pack 40,000 meals to distribute to the Broward County food pantries. And we brought together 150 of our friends, And it was just an amazing, rewarding experience as a way to celebrate the life we've created. One of the most rewarding things was, getting our friends that them and their kids had never done anything for the community together, and being the family that was able to provide that to them, in addition to giving thousands of people dinner. And what it taught me then is, I don't need to wait. I've just got to go for it. And so what my wife and I started doing now is we underwrite the costs of grants for nonprofits in Broward and Palm Beach County. And what that means for me is, as a guy that loves money and making money, I get to pay for a grant to be written. And then hopefully if we accepted that grant, maybe we're getting $25,000 or $50,000 a year, hopefully for a number of years for that organization. So I am able to take my dollar and turn it into 10. So it's only 12 years since that snowy night in New Jersey, which really marks the night that I started living my way. And like I said, I've been amazed by what I've been able to do. I left the comforts of a family business, and I moved away from everyone I knew. I created this strategic plan for my family that's led me to only working on school days. And I've transitioned from being an entrepreneur to an investor and giving generously to the causes that I care about. So I'm really grateful. I wake up every day and I'm just really thankful. And so my message for you today is to go out and buy your lottery ticket and start thinking about who are the people you'd start spending more time with, and who are the people you'd spend less time with. And what are the things that you'd start doing, and what are the things that you'd stop doing? So ladies and gentlemen, my name's Noah Rosenfarb, but I've never won more than $4 playing the lottery. Thanks. So I'll open it up for questions. So I'll open it up for questions if you guys have anything. Anybody here think about who is somebody they'd like to spend more time with if they won the lottery?
Family.
Mm-hmm. And so if you think about next year in 2019, do you think there might be ways you could spend more time with your family if you focused on it and planned for it? And it's unrelated to money?
I think so.
Yeah, great. How about somebody you'd start spending less time with? Anybody have one of those in their mind? You don't have to tell us who it is, right? But you got one of those, right? So everybody's looking at you. Oh, we got a problem. So, yeah.
So out of this lesson, where do you consider home?
Where do I consider? Home. So for me, home is Parkland, Florida, which is where my wife and my kids are. And we love being there. It's been a great experience for us to live down here and enjoy the sunshine. I was sharing a little earlier, we have the good fortune of traveling for the summers. So we get out of the heat and get a chance to see some new places, which has been a great experience as well. Yeah.
So I just started having family meetings. I've been married 52 years. And I just started having family meetings about 2 years ago with my wife and kids. Kids are old. And kind of a neat plan. It tells you to have a plan you working plan has worked out real well. So you're doing that at a younger age than I am.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's really the message, is that, you guys probably have a plan for everything you're doing here. Every day you come here, there's a plan. But what about when you leave here? What's the plan then? Not just, when you leave serving our country, but when you leave here on a day-to-day basis, how are you using your time to work towards your goals? And maybe this lottery ticket can help you focus on what's really important to you. Because at the end of the day, when I speak to people and talk to them about what's important, it's not the money. What's important is spending time with their family. What's important is making a contribution, feeling valued, doing the things that you enjoy. Yeah.
So when you have these State of the Union type meetings with your family, what does that look like? What do you talk about? Do you keep it down,
So in terms of our family meeting, right now my wife and I primarily do the meeting, just the two of us. My kids are 11 and 8 at this point, and they get exposed to a lot because we tend to have dinner every night together, at least 6 nights a week, and we have structured conversations around what's going on. For my wife and I, it's really focused around our strategic plan. So we have, our mission, our vision, and our values. And then we're looking at what's our 10-year target. Right now, really, for us, our 10-year targets we call 2030 just because it's a round number. But that's when my daughter's out of school. So we assume she'll be out of our house, and our son's a couple years older. So we're thinking about what does that next stage of life look like for us when we don't have day-to-day parenting responsibilities, and what are we working towards? And so we set goals for the year, and then we break that down by quarter. I'll tell you, like, one of the goals that I've had that might be interesting to you is I try and spend like one weekend a year with each of my kids separately without my wife. Something that I've set as a goal because I want to foster my independent individual relationship with each of them. And this actually through EO, the organization that brought me here today, I organized a daddy-daughter sleepover up in outside of Orlando at Westgate River Ranch. Last year we had 12 dads and about 18 daughters. We went and did an overnight together. It was a lot of fun. My daughter loved it. She's still talking about it, so we're going again this March. And my son, on the flip side, he's more into sports. We'll go to a Miami Heat game, and he doesn't really want to go away for a weekend yet, but the offer's on the table. So it's one of my goals, not necessarily his. Yeah.
Noah, is it all right to share maybe any strategies or anything that you did to combat fear and doubt? Because you made a huge jump right there. I mean, you had a cushy job, and you had a wife to answer to, you had a kid along the way. Surely, I'm guessing, how were you able to combat fear and doubt when it was rear its head?
Yeah, so the question is, how did I combat fear and doubt? A lot of it for me was money. So, I mentioned part of my origin story is always kind of being of the mindset that I didn't want to be in my mom's position of struggling financially. And so that was the fear that's driven me a lot. And part of that for me was always being a saver. So I always was putting my acorns away. And when it came time to make this decision, my wife's leaving her job, we're having our first baby, I'm becoming a partner at a firm, but I don't see that as my future. I had my nest egg squirreled away, and we looked at each other, and I had a year's worth of expenses, and I said, look, if I don't make any money for a year, we're covered, and I'll have to go get a job if I fail. I'll go back. I was employable, so I could just go back and get a job as a partner at a CPA firm, but if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen. I'm just going to get further and further ensconced and trapped in this life. And again, it wasn't a bad life, right? But it wasn't the life I wanted. So I think for me, the battle of the fear was around money. All the fear for me, it comes around money. It comes around not having food, and not having a meal. And I didn't want to be in that position. But if I could protect myself from that fear, I kind of felt like I could take on the world. David?
You did a lot of transitions. What were some of those challenges that you had faced opening up your own wealth management firm, moving down here, and transitioning from off board to investor?
Yeah, so challenges in transition. Socially, I would say there's a huge transition from going to being in a community where, my father was a CPA, as I mentioned, and I had joined his firm. I'd walk into a business meeting and someone would come up to me and say, oh, are you Sam's son? And yeah. So they knew, I was sometimes known before I entered a room. And then I came down to Florida and I didn't know anybody. And I had to start over. And actually one of the great things about the Entrepreneurs Organization that I joined is it became an instant brotherhood and an instant bond with the members. And it really became my social outlet. So most of my friends that I socialize with now are members of this Entrepreneurs Organization. And then of course my kids were young, and that helped because we were with the kids on the play dates, and you have to meet the other parents, and so you become friendly with them. And this past Memorial Day, we had the good fortune of spending a weekend with a couple of the kids and their families. We all rented a house together, so the social transition was really the hardest for me. Being away from family, as I'm sure many of you have experienced, many times, for me it was a big choice, but it was a choice that still had a lot of pain associated with it. It took a while, and I don't know even that I'm still used to that transition of not being around my large family. So we have, on my father's side, I've got, my stepmom has 3 sisters, and her parents were around a long time. My grandfather's 100, and, we fly up for his birthday party because that's an event we don't want to miss. But, not being around for all the holidays, not being around for the, family gatherings, that was tough. But we always were confident with the trade-off, and I think that's part of the recognition for me of transition, is it's not going to be moving from one thing that's not perfect to something that is perfect. It's just trying to tweak it and maybe create a little bit more happiness, a little bit more comfort, a little bit more excitement, whatever it is that I'm trying to optimize for. I know there's going to be a trade-off somewhere. Yeah.
You say you make a plan for the future, for your 10-year 5 and stuff like that. How do you have that clear goal already set? Because you said when you moved down here, like you knew where you wanted to live.
Yeah.
But did you have a clear set goal of what you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
It keeps changing.
It keeps changing?
Yeah, and that's the great thing about planning, and I'm sure you've spoken about that here as a unit. You have a plan, but then, the real world, right? What does it say? You walk into the ring, then everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? So, life throws curveballs, and I've wiggled and waggled a bunch. I wouldn't have ever thought, like I mentioned, I'd be where I am now 10 years ago, even though I had a 10-year plan then. It's much better.
How do you deal with that as far as your planning goes?
Yeah, so it's just
emergency family board meeting?
No, it's affording flexibility and recognizing opportunity. So one of the big things that's come for me is an opportunity filter. It's looking at things that come my way and trying to decide, how does this fit with my goals and my long-term goals? One of the concepts that I think is really powerful is they're basically the goals that you have over 25 years that aren't going to change, right? So certain things to me are going to be just as important tomorrow as they're going to be in 25 years, like my relationship with my wife. And so I know that that's something I want to protect for a long time. That's a non-negotiable for me. But maybe there's other things, like I really enjoy spending time at home with my young kids, but that doesn't mean I'm home every night. I still prioritize other things over that. So I think there's a bit of flexibility, but marching in a direction just gets the movement going, right? So, being open to change, what I found, because I do this strategic planning inside the companies that I own, is that once we set the vision, once we kind of know where we're going to, just the progress happens so much faster. Yeah.
So what kind of tools or resources did you use when you sit down and make that plan? So like when I sit down and say, hey, I want to be done working in 10 years.
Yep.
We're not, I'm not a financial guru, so how would I know what do I need to do? Like,
Yeah.
what kind of resources?
Great. So what do you do if you want to, you have a goal, but you're not exactly sure how to achieve it? I think it's finding people that can support you, that are experts. So, I'm my own expert when it comes to finance, because that's really the passion area of mine. Like I mentioned, money's been a big part of my mind and focus for my whole life. So I'm an expert in that. But there's other people like me that are experts in helping people like you figure out, hey, if you want to retire in 10 years, how much money do you need? What's your pension going to look like? And they do the math. The math is just part of it. The psychology is more important, or equally important, however you want to look at it. But the psychology around transition is really critical, and understanding what's the future that's more exciting than what I'm doing now. And I coached entrepreneurs that have sold their companies. I had a business that did that. I sold it a few years ago, and I've written a couple books about it. And really, that's the amazing thing for people to learn, is that 75% of entrepreneurs that sell their companies aren't happy about it. And it's not because they didn't get as much money as they needed to live the rest of their life. It's because they don't know what to do with themselves. And they don't know how to bring value to the world when they're not inside their business. And I think if you're thinking about a transition from working to not working, it's making sure that transition, you still feel valued. Because when they study people, and the statistics are pretty dismal about the longevity after people retire. Right? I don't know if you've heard it, but it's a pretty bad stat around how long people live after they're done working. And a lot of that's because they don't have purpose. And I think our bodies require us to have a purpose. And when our body doesn't have a purpose, it tends to shut down. Yeah.
What's a good way to build a network? When, for example, you had,
Yeah.
what if you don't have that network? How can you build it? Because for us, it's easy. We're in the military. We go to different bases.
Yep.
But on the outside, if you're not, you go to no place, you don't always have that network.
Yeah, so how do you build a network? I think you've got to find a place where you feel at home. So it starts with, where do you feel comfortable? So for some people, that's like a religious space is a great place to start building a community. For others, it's around an activity. Maybe, you have a certain hobby, and so you get engaged with a community of people that share that same hobby. Maybe, find the things that you care about, that when you meet other people that care about it, you have a connection. And that's the great place to start, because it's a natural way to build relationships, and you have something that you can lean on to connect with. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have a template that maybe you can share so that you set your goals or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question about like my personal planning process. I've thought about writing a book about it, because I've amalgamated a bunch of different systems from different people. And really the only reason to write it is so my kids would have it. I don't expect anyone else to read it. But I would suggest that you find something that works for you, because there's a bunch of different planning systems out there. I've adopted, because I use something called Traction, which is the entrepreneurial operating system in businesses. I've adopted that for my family. But it's kind of, it's very business focused. And I think it just depends what other systems, GTD is David Allen, getting things done. They have a system for productivity, which a lot of times ties in productivity to your goals. There's something called the Wheel of Life, which are basically 8 areas that you start setting goals in. So, physical, mental, spiritual, health, education, community, family, and financial. So, if you take a look and start setting goals in each of those areas and deciding, what do I want to work on this year? What's this year going to be about? What's really the goal that I want to work on for this year? And then how would I break that down into quarters? One of the best books on this is actually called The 4 Disciplines of Execution, 4DX. And the reason I like 4DX as a model is it talks a lot about activities and behaviors. So when we set a goal, oftentimes what predetermines our success are the actions we're going to take to get there. And unfortunately, we can't always hit our goals, but if we hit our actions, then our probability's high and we could be proud of ourselves. So if you have, my hardest goal has always been my weight. I've been overweight my entire life. I've never been thin for more than a minute. And so, that's the constant struggle for me. I try and set my goal, I try and do my activities and behaviors, but sometimes it gets away from me. For other people, they're really successful in one area and not in another. And you've got to decide, what are those activities that you need to do on a regular basis to help you achieve your goal. And so when you break down the goal into the activities and behaviors, you could start monitoring that. So like one for me that I think is somewhat unique is I try and sleep in bed next to my wife 330 nights a year. And I try and measure that. And thankfully, the last couple of years I've exceeded that goal. But there were years that I was under. And I wouldn't have known it unless I was measuring it. That's something that's important to us. Yeah.
In that vein, so you've set your strategic plan, and it sounds like you evaluate your goals. But you sit down like with your family or even with yourself and just kind of debrief on the ones that you missed. And you have a process for that, and then kind of explore how you can do things better the next time. And if you have any examples. I mean, it seems like you've hit a lot of your goals.
Yeah.
But if you ever missed some of your goals, how have you recovered from those?
So when missing goals, and what's the process of recovering when you miss a goal? And for me, the missing is always around physical stuff for me. I let other priorities get ahead of it, and it's been a trade-off over time forever. For her, she tends to be really proactive in hitting her goals, and then for me, thankfully, on the business side, it's been a pretty nice just curve right up. I'm trying to think of other places we've missed. I mean, we've certainly missed with the kids, the hardest part for me about being a parent is that the measurement of success metric is like, I don't know what it is. So in business, I know, there's revenue, there's expenses, there's profit, there's growth, there's the team and how well are we retaining our talent. There's so many measurables. With my children who are 11 and 8, I can see how they're doing in school. I can see how they treat me at breakfast and at dinner, but I have no clue how they're going to turn out. And so it's like an exercise where, this past summer we had a challenge with the kids. They were I think my son got into this Fortnite video game, and that hasn't been a very healthy process. And then my daughter all of a sudden got sassy, like more than usual. So we've been trying to, combat that. That was like one of these big misses is, we like to, my friend just told me about a book, Raise the Kids You Have, Not the Kids You Want. And, it's like, we would love to have perfect children because that's what we want. But, we've got real children. And so that's an area that I think is the hardest part to deal with. And just being accepting. And for us, that goes back to our values. So one of my biggest values is happiness. I really value happiness. And so with my kids, I talk about, supporting them in what makes them happy and not necessarily them feeling like they have to do anything that I've done to try and follow in my footsteps. Yeah.
You seem very focused on your goals and your direction, where you want to be, what you want to do, and all. So in a two-vote household, if the other party decides she doesn't see the vision you're looking at, how do you go to accommodate a compromise, but yet not reduce where you want to be, where you feel like you're missing an opportunity?
Yeah.
Where if we were going this direction, because to make a step, to come from the Northeast down here, that's a huge first step.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stress involved with that. So when you're going to make that transition, how do you get the buy-in where you said you had your year's plan, but things happen, situations take place, and it can all fall apart pretty quick. So how do you keep control of that whole situation without causing undue stressors and maybe you start the marriage?
Yeah, and you're saying in two households, right?
No, you got two votes. You got your vote and your spouse.
Oh, got it. Just with two votes in general. Yeah. So how do you manage the process of different opinions when you're doing planning? And I think it's leadership, right? And I think you guys are all learning your own leadership skills and how to manage people and how to manage teams when there's a difference of opinion. So a lot of it comes down, for me, what I find is always starting with what we agree on. So if we start with what we agree on, then we get to build off of that. And then where do we start having divergence? My wife would like our kids not to have electronics. I kind of think they need to get used to electronics, right? So what's that push and pull? How do we find a compromise? And sometimes it's today's her day, tomorrow's my day. Who's around? That's one of those big disparities. But trying to not let it get in the way of our relationship is really focusing on our long-term goals. So we might have disagreements about specific things. Trying to think of what else besides these electronic. How much sugar can the kids eat, right? Can they have dinner every night, dessert every night, and is it 2 candy bars or is it 1, right? There's things that we could disagree on, but if we know what the goal is and we know we have a shared vision, we could always come back to that. And I think, that whether you're in an organization, whether you have a goal as a team or a unit here, it's the same at home. You got to bring that back to the house and focus again on what are you trying to accomplish together. And if you could focus on the bigger picture, then sometimes the rest becomes meaningless. And for me, my wife and I have this deal. I say, look, you get to wear the pants in the family until I need them. Because I don't have a really strong opinion about the little stuff because I'm focused on the big picture. But every once in a while, I have to say, you know what, honey? Like, I don't want that to fly. And because it's rare, she's willing to, concede pretty quickly. Any other questions for today? Well, listen, I appreciate you guys listening. Hopefully there's some takeaway for you. And you'll go buy your lottery ticket and work on those questions. Thanks.
All right, Noah, thank you.